posting up pictures, trying to look like you winning. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking in moments we live in. Yeah, you got the nerve to be on me, faking your life for the IG. If you got my number, don't add me, cause baby, I'm on hiatus.
Hey, guys. Thank you for tuning in this evening to Grown Dating Talk. I'm your host, Alona V. Now, I want to say I'm really proud of you guys because for the most part, I haven't got as many emails as before complaining about tomfoolery between the male and female genders. So I'm hoping that means that everything is going good. However, we still are going to get back to the dysfunctionalism that occurs between the male and female gender. And tonight, we're going to be discussing an important topic that is really important in dating and relationships. And it might trigger some people, in all honesty, because some of you are going to agree with some of the opinions that we have and perspectives that we have on panel. And some people are not going to agree with it. Some women are going to say, hey, why didn't you have more females on panel? And we'll get to that toward the end of the episode. But for tonight's episode, we're going to discuss toxic masculinity. We're going to discuss what it is, what it looks like, where it stems from, in addition to the pressures and impact that it has on the newer generation of men coming up and the generation of men that we see out there today. For those of you who feel like, well, why didn't you have more women on panel tonight? Because we're going to have a part 2 where we talk about toxic femininity, and that's going to be on a separate episode. But for tonight, it was just best to have male special guests on panel whom are all in functional relationships and dating functionally, and whom can understand the impact of toxic masculinity on today's society. And they're going to speak to you firsthand from an endearing perspective and a truthful perspective, but above all and utmost, we're going to keep it funky and we're going to keep it real on tonight's panel. So I want to introduce our 4 guest panelists, Christian Melendez,
Hello.
Michael DeWitt, and Rick Jenkins. And of course, myself, Alona V. So I'm going to give each panelist a moment to introduce themselves and talk a little bit of their background. So this way you can get familiar with them. So we'll start with Rick Jenkins. Why don't you let us know who you are, what you do, and what greatness you're going to bring to tonight's episode.
This is my 4th episode sharing with you and having the opportunity to share with your viewers. I just wanted to extend lots of gratitude to those who watched the episode on being able to let people go. Over 1,000 plus viewers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we hit
that was very good. I'm Rick Jenkins. I am the CEO and founder of Just Be Better Fitness. I am a multi-certified trainer, a certified life coach, a certified nutritionist, and you've heard us before. So to sum all that up, my superpower is I unlock people to their best potential. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
And that's the God's the honest truth, ladies and gentlemen. So when it comes to Just Be Better Fitness, owned and operated by Rick Jenkins, you can contact him. He unlocks people physically. He'll help you get your revenge body together. He'll help you just be better mentally, emotionally, socially, all around. So definitely, look him up.
It starts as revenge body, but over time, we get to coach you to a healthier mind state, where it's not about the revenge and more about how you build yourself and focus on yourself and seeing yourself in more of a positive body image. And so whoever you're getting revenge on becomes irrelevant, because now it's about you. It's not about trying to impress them, but it's about being the best version of yourself for yourself.
Yes, I agree. I think I'm at the higher level. I started at the revenge, but I'm at the higher level now.
It's like he molds greatness.
Yes, exactly.
I wouldn't say mold, because all it is we each of us have to see our greatness, and sometimes we can't see it. And so all I do is I say, look how great you are, and then help you embrace it.
I like that.
And that's for each of us. We all have that capacity, and so I just unlock people.
I wish for Christmas I could gift everybody a Rick Jenkins, like Oprah Winfrey. You get a Jenkins, you get a Jenkins, you get a Jenkins, because everybody.
I'd be exhausted. I'm already exhausted, but I'd be exhausted.
The next guest that we have on panel that I want to introduce this evening is Michael DeWitt. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, how y'all doing? I'm Michael DeWitt. I'm in my 10th year in education. I started as a dean, transitioned eventually into the classroom, which is a little bit of a switch. A lot of people go from the classroom to being a dean. The reason I made that transition was because I saw a lot of instances of classroom management just not happening and relationship building not happening. And I got tired of dealing with kids outside the classroom who didn't need to be outside the classroom. So I'm in now going into my 5th year as an ELA teacher in the middle school. And in terms of my qualifications to be here, I suppose, I am in my 2nd year of marriage and I was with my wife for 8 years prior to that. And just recently got a house, the dog, the whole nine. So yeah, happy to be here.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So much for
That's
being
right.
here. Love it. Him and his wife are the cutest couple. I swear to God. Like Michael and his wife are the epitome of like Cinderella and Prince Charming. Like it is a fairy tale with them always. I remember in the beginning, even to now, it ain't stop. It ain't stop. It ain't stop. Michael was like, "That's a good woman. I got my good woman." He wasn't letting that go. So when I saw the web pictures, I was like, "Oh yeah." So when people say Black love, I was like, what? Black love is alive. You better search on because you'll find the right brother out there if you wait and invest in yourself a little bit, you know? So
And understand when you're imperfect and admit to it.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I thank you for being on panel. And now our next guest, Christian Melendez, Mr. Zoom. Mr. Zoom, can you tell us about yourself, please?
Well, I am a ongoing working security guard. I work at the 7th World Trade Center right now. Not married though, sadly, but I've been out of work and I've been doing, I think, security for about a year or two now, almost 2 years now. Doing like working in like high government building is like stressful even on its own. I've been in somewhat of a lot of relationships where I feel like men are more like, they kind of like, what's that word? I would say they have like sort of like a type to fill the role, and I feel like we have like a lot of toxicness in society nowadays when it comes to men and how we being treated today.
Okay. I agree with you totally, because a lot of times people will say that men are toxic, right? And then not look at the dynamic and how men are being treated. Because it's like, is he being toxic or is he responding to these variables that are forced upon him? Because, you know, we have to be frank in that. Not every man is toxic, you know? And I want to take a moment before we start to talk about like what toxic masculinity is. Because some people will say, well, what are you talking about when you say toxic masculinity, Alana? What are you guys speaking about? So I'm talking about toxic masculinity that involves like cultural pressures for men to behave in a certain way. And it's likely that this affects boys and men because boys look to men to see how they should behave, how they should react, how they should handle such situations. And this refers to the notion that people's ideas of manliness perpetuates domination, homophobia, and aggression. So when we're talking about toxic masculinity, we're talking about ways in which men are being excessively dominant, excessively homophobic, and or excessively aggressive. And that aggression doesn't necessarily have to be physical aggression. It can be verbal aggression. You have passive aggressive situations. It can be the way that they handle situations. Maybe things were modeled for them a certain way, and they're just walking through life in manners in which were modeled for them. Some men are able to recognize, hey, that was modeled wrong. Some men aren't. So we're going to talk about that and talk about an even broader range and scope of toxic masculinity this evening. I want to open the panel by asking, you guys, the guests, what do you see as toxic masculinity? Because you're men yourselves. So a lot of times women want to shove what we feel to the forefront. Tonight, I want to give you guys the stage.
Anyone gonna go first? I don't know.
Oh, it's
I mean,
fine. If you want to go first, you
Oh.
can put your finger up or jump in or anything. Yeah. Just make
So
sure
just
you're
like
not
raise my
going-
hand.
You're up. So go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Christian. We'll start with you.
I think toxic masculinity is more of just like the way is how men are supposed to be. Like we're supposed to act a certain way. We're supposed to be a certain way. We're already like scripted and modeled to do this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I guess whether if it's being too nice or too more outgoing, would say that it's a little toxic because you have other men saying, "Oh, like why are you doing this? Like you're not supposed to do that," you know.
Mm-hmm.
As to being toxic in like in a personal level, I would say just how forthcoming you are, what kind of person you are, and other men will kind of just like deem you and pretty much put you in that bubble of just like, oh, you're like one of those, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Even worse, where you're dealing with homosexuality, and I say a lot of most people won't really understand that, you know.
Mm-hmm. That is true. That definitely is true because a lot of times a man can be very affectionate or very understanding, and then people are saying, "Oh, he's gay," and it's like, well,
Right.
wait a minute. That doesn't mean he's gay. It means he's emotionally mature and he's tapped
It's
in.
that kind of like equivalent to like, oh, a girl's being nice, she must like you type thing, which is not really the case.
Yes. Yes. What do you guys think about that? Either Michael or Rick.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the even the homosexuality part, because there is like that, just like you said, if you assume like a man's nice that he's gay, there were some people who would assume that just because a man is gay that he has no toxic traits whatsoever.
Yes, that's true.
And it's interesting that a couple of days before you contacted me about this, one of my best friends happens to be gay. He also he officiated my wedding, actually. Excuse me. And he just recently started dating. And the guy that he was dating, he was telling him how like I'm his ideal of what a non-toxic man is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the way I carry myself and my ideals, and the way I carry my ideals out in my daily life. And I guess the way I look at toxic masculinity now, I think is a lot different than what it looked like when I was growing up.
Okay.
I'm 38. What I think it looks like now is just like holding on to these old, not even the way that men used to be expected to act, but this glorified way of how men used to be expected to act. And a lot of it just is really illogical and doesn't even take into account the reality of the way things were. Also, what you have is a lot of changing social dynamics where a lot of men really are being taken aback by a lot of the power that women have now. And a lot of what you see in the media in terms of pushback to what you hear now called cancel culture. A lot of that is just instances of people who did not have any social clout now exercising that. And a lot of that is, about around misogyny and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100% on that one. What do you think about that, Rick? Especially because you're a life coach. So you deal with a lot of men too.
I feel like he's probably got the best info out of all of us.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
so Mike, you're 38, and Christian, I've known you since you were like 12, and you're a young man now. So we have three different generations of men representing this panel.
Mm-hmm.
So in my generation, so my age group might represent a lot of what it is that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is older men that do tend to reflect some of those toxic traits. But I study obsessively all types of things that just help to improve my craft. Toxicity is subjective, or in my opinion, it is subjective. I want to say that each of us, Mike, Christian, all men, we either are active, we either can be actively toxic or potentially toxic, depending on the decisions that we make, depending on the examples that we choose to follow, and more importantly, the example that we choose to set. Because as men, toxic or non-toxic, everybody's watching you in society. Especially if you're a brown or a tan-skinned man nowadays, everybody is watching you, and every move you make has consequences. And so you're either all things to all people, or you're walking on eggshells. which can create more toxic behaviors because not everybody is going to like what you do. Not everybody is going to like what you say. And so that's why I say you're either a toxic or you have the potential to be. And that's subjected to the situations that you're in. What I just said right now, somebody's going to view this and they're going to say, nope, that's it, cancel him. And I like the cancel culture people. They're my favorite because you can't just cancel people who have existed on the planet. And so me even saying that in and of itself, somebody could interpret that as a toxic masculinity trait. I think that there are behaviors and mindsets that a male must have that are absolutes. And I'm going to specify that.
Yes.
A man must be sure of himself because we live in the world that will push and make us as men question everything about ourselves. And so we need to be sure of ourselves before anybody tells you anything. Christian, Mike, Brick, everybody. When you walk out that door, first thing you say is, you know what? I got my back. I know what I'm doing. And no matter how the day shapes up, I'm going to bet on myself every time. To some people, that's a toxic trait. But I don't think it's toxic to bet on yourself as a man. Two, we each of us have to be so mindful of what it is that we do that causes us to kind of create like the shell around us that can also be considered toxic. Sometimes you got to break some eggs in order to make an omelet.
That's true.
Okay. Sometimes you got to make a hard-boiled egg, but in either case, that shell's got to break because you got to eat and you have to take care of business. And we can't worry every minute on the minute whether our words or our actions are going to affect every single person to the point where they feel like, oh, I can't be around this person because they're triggering me. I was just having a discussion the other day.
To stir some shit.
You gotta trigger some people sometimes because from that triggering, hopefully,
comes growth.
This healthy discussion is going to occur. Okay, you got to talk about stuff. Okay, and sometimes that conversation is not going to be pretty. Mike, you said something in the beginning that was so dope, and I 100% agree. When you're in a relationship, you got to admit when you're wrong. You got to know. And trust me, I know. Sometimes, with my lady, it's just like, I really got to bite this bullet. And I really got to suck it up. And I really got to say, you know what, babe? I was wrong. I apologize. And then start changing my behavior. Okay. Toxic male trait, if we start to put in some absolutes, real men don't apologize. Now let's get rid of that.
Yeah, let's get rid of that.
Let's get rid of that one. That's a toxic male trait because
we don't cry while we're doing it either. We definitely don't cry while we're doing it.
Oh, right. real men don't cry. And I'm not a crier, but I know that when my father passed, like I wept real tears because that affected me deeply. And every now and then I'll get those feelings. In fact, I was teaching a boot camp 2 weeks ago, and I was playing some motivational speech. And the words that were being said were the same words that my father would say to me. And in front of complete strangers, 25 people in a gym, I just started crying. And they were like, "You okay?" And I told them, these are words that my father would tell me to get me fired up. And everybody was understanding. And I didn't feel less of a man, but traditional masculinity dictates you don't cry. Oh, you cry, you soft, you pussy, you're gay. I know some real strong gay dudes.
Thank you.
They're real tough. They definitely have shot like 3 or 4 people in their life. And they're definitely gay. But I'm not going to make fun of them because they might say, well, Rick, you're cool, but now I got to choke you out. And I'm a big dude. I'm 6'2", 260. And these are bigger, stronger men than me. I don't think that they're soft at all. But in another time, they would be like, oh, get out of here with that soft. No, we don't have time for that. I think a man should be mindful of his feelings and not in his feelings at the same time.
I also want to jump in there and add to that. Not only do I agree with you on that, Rick, I also think that part of that, men are not supposed to cry and keep those feelings inside. I think that that is not just simply considered a form of toxic masculinity. I say this because there are a lot of women who tell kids to tell their male children, like, I'll give you something to cry for.
I'll give you something to cry about. Mike, you
like,
agree with me.
yeah.
You're a dean. Oh, you were a dean, now you're a teacher.
Yeah.
And this is my opinion, but I think rational, educated, brown and tan men will agree. And even Christian, you can agree too. All brown and tan men have PTSD from childhood.
Yes.
Definitely.
All of
I feel like that's a lot with a lot of people growing up nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
mom beats on you. If not, your dad's gonna beat on you if you don't, suck it up.
right. And Christian, you said if you don't suck it up, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. I'm already crying. I'm already hurt. What more do I have to cry about?
Thank you.
How many more tears do you want me to shed?
Because then you have mom telling you, I'll give you something to cry about. And then you get in a relationship and your woman's saying, you know what? I wish you would just open up and just be more present. I wish you would just open up and tell me how you're feeling. Those are two total opposite ends of the coin. And think about it. As a man's growing up, going to therapy has become stigmatized in the Black community. When we look at people of color, they shy away from going to therapy because most times when they go into therapy, they're met with therapists who do not understand. They're met with therapists who teach them to be angry and harbor anger with the source, as opposed to connecting with the patient and helping the client to understand that what you experience at the hands of your parents is a result of your parents' brokenness and what they didn't get growing up. So your parents are stuck in phases and they therefore couldn't parent you in these ways, and then teach their clients from a point of understanding, like, let me help you reprogram and reparent yourself in these ways, and understand that it's not that you weren't cared about, it's that this parent just didn't know how to be a parent in those aspects.
Well, before therapists get to all of that deprogramming, the first barrier that they have to get past with brown and tan men is their response to their trauma. And it is a 2-word response. I'm good.
Yes.
Yo, how you feeling? I'm good. How you feeling? I'm good. And the immediate response after that should be, I don't think you're good. Like if we're talking about toxic masculinity, then let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that. How you doing, brother? I'm good. Are you though?
Yes, like
you good? Like talk to me. Are you really good?
If I would have heard that, I would have been like, is this a trick question? Like, am I supposed to answer no?
and so that would be the response. But yeah, it's okay to answer that question, because sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not good. Like I'm expected to, and Christian, you said it, I'm expected to provide, protect, be a man, be strong, be solid, everything, not cry, be supportive, be present, communicate, this, that, and all of those pressures put upon that man, they weigh you down. And so toxic masculinity 101 is bottle it all up. And when somebody checks in on you, your only response is, I'm good. But you're not.
Yeah,
I
can speak to that personally. There's a saying that people like to say all things happen for a reason. And normally they like to think of that, in the future. They try to think ahead to a future thing that'll occur because of the present. People look at that backwards. Like, really, the reason that something happens is whatever happened in the past that caused it.
Yes.
And in thinking about that I'm good, the reason I'm with my wife currently is because I had a failed about 10-year relationship. And we were off and on for years. And at one point, we had gotten pregnant and the young lady happened to have a miscarriage. And I did not cry. Matter of fact, I lied. I cried one time. And it was well after the miscarriage happened. And everything that you just said, Rick, I'm good. It was, oh, we're going to the hospital, something's wrong. I'm good. Oh, we don't really hear the heartbeat. I'm good. Oh, you're at work and I have to have this operation and the baby has to be taken out of me. I'm good. Oh, come get me from the hospital. I'm good. Oh, I'm going to cry in front of you. Everything you said to provide, the communication, the listening to everything. And the expectation in my mind, really, no one told me this, but
Right.
the expectation for me was to be good, to take it. I only cried one time. I never internalized the pain and the hurt that that situation caused me, and it wrecked our relationship completely. And it was but the fact that I refused to internalize that pain. And if you can't internalize that pain, you can't share that pain with somebody. And that's a very
and because nobody asked you, hey Mike, how do you feel that you're going to have a child? Nobody asked you, how do you feel that you're going to be a father? How do you feel? And so it's always put on the woman, because clearly she carries the child, but nobody says, hey, are you excited about this? How do you feel? And nobody provided you the opportunity to say, I'm ecstatic about having this baby. I can't wait to see my child. I can't wait to watch my child grow up and teach them lessons. And then I'm sorry about the miscarriage. I went through a similar experience with a relationship, but nobody after that, when it happened, asked you, how devastated are you? How do you feel? Do you want to talk about this? Do you want to unpack this? What's weighing you? Nobody asked you those questions. And so you had to fill the void with, I'm good.
And this is the thing I wanted to point out. The only person that did ask me was my partner. But we're conditioned, at least I was conditioned. Let me not say we. I was conditioned at that point. I can't share this with you. You're too weak. If I share this with you, you're gonna break down. And like this, these are conversations I have with my wife now, because I've learned these things to even not do that. To be willing to share my emotions, even if I feel like it might be triggering to you. Even if I feel like you're not gonna like it, you're gonna have a negative reaction to it. To own my own feelings and to own the responsibility for sharing those. Because if you're in a relationship with somebody, whether you share them or not, the other person's still gonna feel them.
That's right.
One of the things I also like was the point that you made when you said, like, well, I'm not going to speak for others, I'm going to speak for myself. No, definitely speak about where, because at the end of the day, every male has gone through a point in life where they felt like, I can't tell her or this person or the next person what I'm feeling because I don't want to trigger them. They'll feel like I don't want to unload this on someone else. And sometimes people don't want to talk about what happened in the past because they feel like I don't want to make the source that this came from feel bad and look bad. You know, and there's like guilt in there too.
But you know, and I'm pretty sure that the comments are going to be flooded after this.
Oh, but of course, let them come. I got that.
Women gotta really stop putting this unnecessary pressure on men to live up to being men. Women need to stop trying to define what it is to be a man. Yeah, you're not men.
Thank you. Stop talking about I need to tell a man how to be a man. You tell him how to be what you're not.
You can't tell me how to be a man because you're not a man. You don't know you don't see the world the way I see it. You don't feel the pressure the way I feel it. You don't relate because you don't have the same social expectations that I do as a man, especially a brown man. Stop telling me, don't tell me be a man. And you know, a lot of it, and in my experience, because I'm also a former educator, single moms, in my experience, they try to wear the will out of their boys. They try to just break their will. And you know what? I love all my single mothers because there is no stronger individual. But at the end of it all, these boys out here need to learn some real good qualities from men who know these real good qualities for themselves.
Yes.
Especially, I want to say how to be a man, and I'm not going to define that because we're living in different times. And so living in different times, thankfully, we get to define that according to the experience that we get moving forward.
Yes.
But women, stop putting that pressure on these boys. Stop telling them be a man, because if you can't define it, then you can't hold me accountable for it. And that's terrible pressure for
telling them to be a man too, because if you're not bringing a real one home, then you're not setting an appropriate example for him on what it is. And you know what? I'm gonna put it out there and I'm gonna say it because people are gonna say, oh, how in the hell can you? Because you know what? I've been the woman who dated ain't shit men. And I didn't even realize that they weren't shit at the time because I had my own issues going on. You know what I mean? So when you look around at it, it's like, no, stop sitting over here and jumping on your sons and breaking them because you're trying to make them into what you've been dating, or you're trying to make them be the opposite of what you've been dating. How about you get your shit together and then you can model for him on how to be a man, because then you'll have a real one in your life because you got your shit together. And again, that's not devaluing women out there to say, oh, that I'm not responsible for what happens to me. You're not, but you are partially responsible for what you pick.
Also, I feel like
and what you bring home and what you bring in front of them. And if you're bringing the wrong things home and in front of them, then you are responsible in a way. You are responsible, not even in a way, you are responsible for molding them. Stop trying to mold him to be the exact opposite of his dad because you can't stand his dad, because his dad may be a not good husband or an ain't shit boyfriend, but that doesn't mean that his father's an ain't shit father. Because being a man and making you very happy versus, rather not even being a partner, an ideal partner for you, has nothing to do with him being an ideal father for his child. And I think that that is a problem there that women don't seem to make the connection with. You taking out your daddy issues on your son. You're trying to make your son and pressure him into being something. A lot of these single mothers, the way they're pressuring their boys, they're growing up, like you said, with PTSD. They're growing up looking at the street, idolizing that, because they're like, well, what the hell? When mom's like, oh, you sitting over here acting like this. But look at how you act, mom. Look at some of the men that you talk to. Look at how they act. Then turn around and look at the pressures you're putting on your son. And now you're telling your son that he shouldn't act a certain way. Well, what did you show him growing up?
What you're talking about is the inception of toxic masculinity.
Yes.
That's where it starts. But then,
so before we jump into that, before women go, oh, you trying to blame? No. We're not saying that single mothers are the sole blame for toxic masculinity. We're talking about the part that this parenting plays and that molding plays when there's no male role model involved. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
But then on the inverse, it's also about the upbringing of those young ladies and what they're exposed to in terms of how men are being described to them.
Yes.
So if you're around your daughters and you're talking about, man, he ain't shit, what is she gonna say when she sees men who you associate with and their attributes? Oh, well, I guess he ain't shit. So that's my experience with men.
There you go. And then when the daughter
so it perpetuates the cycle.
And mom's like, what happened with this? She's gonna be like, well, I'm doing what you showed me. And then the mother's upset, as opposed to being like, you know what? This is triggering to me to hear, but there's some truth in it. Like, okay, I showed you this, but then now I need you to understand why to go the opposite way, because you saw what didn't work for me.
I feel like I can relate to toxic masculinity because I grew up in a household with no father.
Okay.
So off rip, I didn't even know where it could come with. Growing up, I felt like I was taught by older men from like different generations. So seeing that now, I feel like I'm growing up now. Seeing it now, it's definitely wrong. I feel like there's like almost a bit of an agenda almost, because growing up, you see how, especially me personally, I've seen how my mother was always going out and trying to find another partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it always never used to work out because she always had, I like to call it flow. Like she always like pick these guys that are just piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
I would see that. Like the first day I like shake the hand, like, hi, how you doing? And I would kind of like look at my mom. This was when I was like a lot younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I don't know, I don't like him, you know? And most of the times, like she would like date them and they would live in the house and stuff like that. I never liked it. I was always a, rebellious kid growing up in my household. So whatever I didn't like, I'd air out my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with my sister too. I would always observe how my sister would always date, how she would argue over the phone, or how her boyfriend's handling situations. And to me, it was just like, oh, it's almost okay for you to like to do what you want. as when you're growing up as a man. Women shouldn't really tell you like, oh, you should be doing this. Like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. Because why? Because like, oh, because I'm a man. I'm not I'm not gonna listen to you.
There it is. Oh, because I'm a man.
So it's just like I've never been like that. I've always been kind of like a softer tone. Just like, no, let's try to talk things out. Or oh, let's try to work things out. I remember one time I remember I came back from work and my friend was coming. I was just like, oh man, I've been fighting with my girl. Like they've been dating for like 2 years. And I was just like, he was just like, you want someone to come back to when you're going to work. To me, I didn't know what that really meant until later in life. I was like, okay, I see where he's coming from. Like I said, it's like almost a preset agenda. Like women got to clean, women got to do this, women have to have a hot plate of food before your man gets home. It's just not like that anymore.
Yeah, because some of these women can't cook. So if she might have Popeyes in front of you, Kennedy chicken, like Taco Bell.
I mean, that's fine too, but it's almost just like I'm not that type of guy. I'm not expecting something in return every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more like it's a co-op thing. It's just like it's a 50-50 thing.
But it's, if you guys disagree, it's fine. I don't think it's toxic to have expectations in your relationship. Whoever gets home first, cook. Whoever gets home first, do the laundry or do the laundry together. I hate.
Nah, B, you get home first. Even if I got home first, if you cook better, I'm gonna find something in that house to do. I'll be slow wiping and dusting until you get home.
Right.
Whoever cook better.
That's called strategy. So I get that part. But like me, I hate doing laundry. And but I'll do it, but I don't like it. But Jazz, she loves doing laundry. And so I'll take it to the laundromat and I'll stay there and I'll fold or whatever. But I hate doing laundry, but I love washing dishes. She hates washing dishes. I love to cook. She can cook, but I have a love for cooking. So I'll cook. But the last few times she's like, I'm gonna cook for you. We both worked that day and she's like, I'm gonna cook for you. And she said, you just sit and you relax. You had a long day here. And so I don't find that toxic at all. I don't find having an expectation is toxic at all. Christian, you said it. It feels good. Mike, it feels good to you. If you come home and you have a long day and she's like, babe, I made dinner for you. Does that not feel good? That's not toxic. That's that's partnership.
Yeah.
That's work.
That's right.
Ideal. That's heaven. That's Garden of Eden right there. Shoot.
I feel like when it becomes toxic is when it's the expectation is solely based on your gender. So Chris, everything you were saying, and even Rick, like I've been teaching remotely. My wife's been teaching remotely, and then she's back at her job. She's actually she's a Dean 3, so she's like one step down from an assistant principal. I've been doing the vast majority of the cooking. Like since we've lived together, I've done the vast majority of the cooking. Just like you said, Rick, my wife can cook. I like to cook.
Right.
So like that, I think the danger is when people just look beyond the individual that they're dealing with and just go, oh, well, you're the woman, we're going to live together. So you should probably do X, Y, and Z versus just like actually dealing with the individual that you're dealing with. But part of that, it becomes a lot harder to do that the longer you're with somebody, because then you actually learn who that person is. And I think a lot of relationships break down because we already have these preconceived notions of what the relationship should look like.
Right. Exactly. Like for me, like I'm a big dude, and when a dude and I also my day job is I'm the director of personal training at a gym franchise, and so when the other big dudes they find out that I cook, they're like, oh, your wife doesn't cook? And I'm like, no, I enjoy it. And they're like, oh, I see it. And I'm like, oh, well, what is it that you see?
Yeah, because you're gonna put them on blast.
Yeah, because both Christian and Alana will tell you, like, I'm funny as shit. I roast, and so that might be considered a toxic trait because I roast without mercy, and that goes all the way back to the 90s and the 2000s. That's just what we do. And so
somebody overstep. I'll hit up Rick like,
right, yeah, I overstep. I'm a habitual overstepper. And so
that's that toxic right there, you know.
Yeah, it
you
is.
say the wrong thing, you know. It's
Right,
you know.
But sometimes that's a little necessary because they're like, oh well, my lady, she'll just order food for me, and I'll be like, well, that's why you got diabetes, because all you do is eat out, high sodium sugar.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, me and my lady, we looking good and we feel good because everything's home cooked, and everybody who's there is like, oh, like why'd you say that his feelings are hurt? And as a point of discussion, my particular toxicity is that I don't care if they're hurt, because they're an adult and it should have stayed in their place. Because if you mess with the bull, you get the horns. Period.
I feel like I'm back
You
in
know
school now.
Don't
I
start
agree with
none,
that.
won't be none.
I think that a lot of times people will say things like, oh, this person is toxic because they're conceited. This man is toxic because he wants to be above everybody else. And I'll say, well, no, he's confident in himself and he's sound in the way he feels and the way he thinks. And there's nothing toxic about that. Like, toxic is if he's just coming out and starting shit with you and trying to watch with you and bring down
to
your
make
day.
himself look like a bigger man. Now we don't have time for that. I'm mind my business. I'm just trying to, do some things.
And I'm like, if you got something to say and he responds back and you can't take what he had to say in return, that didn't make him toxic. That makes him well-versed. He can reciprocate very quickly.
But that's more about the expectations that someone had when they approached you. It's the same thing with women. When especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, if you were assertive, actually worse earlier than that, because you had women who were assertive, you had women who thought for themselves, you had women who were educated, and they were reviled. Like, they were called every negative word under the sun simply for the fact that they were willing to assert themselves. So a lot of that, especially when you're talking about Black and brown men, a lot of that comes from a space where the second that we become assertive, we're viewed as dangerous.
Yes.
Right? So
assertiveness with aggression, and that's not true.
Yeah, because part of it is because of racism in this country, Black men were really only allowed to be aggressive with other Black people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and if you showed that outwardly, like your life was on the line. So we only were really able to show that amongst each other. So when you get like myself in a professional space, that doesn't happen so much now because I think people are more well-versed in certain things. But the second I had a disagreement about anything, and if I raised my voice even an iota, it was a problem. He looked at me differently. I had instances where I was asked to tuck my shirt in at jobs where white people were not asked to tuck their shirt in at jobs. And it had nothing to do with simply the fact that the way that people would perceive me. So a part of it is that as well. Like, that's why the expectation is what it is.
I agree. That's toxicity, because it's like the workplace comes at men of color with this idea like they need to be domesticated. First off, that's a whole grown man there. He knows how to govern himself. I truly dislike when society tries to tell a man how to wear his hair, how to wear his clothes, what type of tone to use, because quite frankly, and on that note, with that said, be sure to join us next week for part 2 of Toxic Masculinity. And we will see you next week for all things grown and mature.
For the record, yeah. For the record, for the record, yeah. For the record. Been a little too nice to y'all. Now I gotta up price for y'all. Snake eyes on dice for y'all. Shoulders on ice for y'all. Frozen. H6 all the hate. I won't get involved today. Got lost in the ballin' age. I'm flipping the bars. I'm flipping the. On record, off record. I still count wins when they doubt it. On record, off record. I let them take advantage. I was wildin'. On record, off record deals. Tell them talk to Colin for the quote. On record, off record. I still want the act, not the ghost. Running through it with the young influence. Adolescent presence. I'm succumbing to it. I've been giving yeses when I shouldn't do it. I complete ejected with the loser. And I'm barely moving, but I'm still gon' boost them. I can't work on winners when I know you're losing. So I with the winners and they throw the deuces. Guess I have to pivot, shooting the bazookas for the facts. I need racks, paper, cash, fuck a tax. That's a joke. Tell them laugh. Uncle Sam, fuck out the bag. Brody plot, will get a whack. Contract, give me the max. I got lab on my back. You ain't that, then it's raps. Whoa. For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's